What was the worst side effect you have ever experienced and what was it from? I had muscle dystonia and ocular gyric crisis from metoclopramide, a drug that stops nausea and vomiting. Muscle dystonia spasms your muscle into an involuntary, awkward position. Ocular gyric crisis rolls your eyes back into your head. My neck contorted to the side, twisting so far back I thought it would snap. My neck was so contorted that I could see the wall directly behind me. Then I couldn't see anything at all because my eyes rolled back into my head. Trying to force my eyes to look straight or down was almost impossible. It was like an imaginary pair of hands pulling and stretching them back. I was at home and tried to find the phone, but I couldn't see. I shuffled around on my hands and knees for an hour, feeling for a plastic rectangle. My eyes and neck were in so much pain, and I thought my eyes would finally snap from whatever was holding them in their eye sockets. Then I found it. I found the phone. And then I realized I couldn't see. I desperately tried turning it on or dialing the emergency number, but I just couldn't see and nothing happened. So over another excruciating hour, I used all my power to look downward, find out the battery was flat, locate the charger, and eventually dial for an ambulance. I work in the ER and this drug, Reglan, is such a toss-up. It also can cause severe akathisia, restlessness, and induce panic attacks. In addition to the muscle dystonia, it can also induce Parkinsonism, a syndrome that causes symptoms similar to Parkinson's until it wears off. There have, however, been reports of permanent neurological damage if the reaction is severe enough. I hate the fact it's used so commonly with such intense common side effects. I was given it once for nausea in the hospital and I wanted to rip my fourths out and run through the front door. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. Drug-induced akathisia is absolutely horrendous. Took an antibiotic and a pain reliever. Went to work a little fuzzy, but it was no big deal. Swung by the pharmacy after work and picked up the second antibiotic since it was back in stock. Went home, ate dinner, took all 3 pills, and went to bed. That was Friday night. When I woke up again, my husband was sitting at the foot of the bed looking slightly terrified of me. Turns out it was Sunday night. I apparently woke up Saturday morning, drove myself to work, busted my ass for 4 hours, and got sent home for working the temps out of their jobs and appearing to be feeling unwell. Drove myself home, slept until early the following morning, then woke up and screamed at my husband to make me a full 3-course meal right that instant. I then proceeded to eat 6 separate full meals over the course of the day before walking back to our room and sleeping for a solid 4 hours, at which point I woke up and was being caught up on all the events. 5 years later, and I still apologize for the way I treated my husband that day. I also have it across all my charts that I never want to take that antibiotic again. Lol. Was prescribed lisinopril/HCTZ for my high blood pressure. Worked great, at least for my systolic pressure. The first number got it down to well within the target. About 2 years later I failed a dementia screening. My doctor was concerned, but couldn't see anything to do about it. She just assumed it was because I was getting old and marked it for follow-up the next year to see if it was getting worse. About half a year later, I was watching television, something I almost never do, and realized that twice in a row, I couldn't follow the plot of an ordinary 15-second commercial. It scared me enough that I googled lisinopril dementia and found out that it's a less than 1% chance side effect. Made a panicky call to my doctor's office and got switched to losartan, which I've tolerated much better. Funny thing about that supposedly 3 per thousand or so complication, I mentioned this to a computer programmer friend of mine who was also on the stuff, and he and his wife both reacted with alarm. It turns out that he'd been complaining of declining mental function for months. It had almost cost him his job, and his doctor hadn't spotted the connection either. Suboxone. I've been through withdrawals from other opiates, methadone and heroin, but Suboxone was the worst. I tried cold turkey, and it lasted 4 weeks. Cold sweats, constant tingling skin, runny nose, no appetite, diarrhea and other flu-like symptoms. Daily battles with crippling depression. Crying for no reason. Nights were the worst. Restless legs, sore muscles, backaches. The absolute worst part is that you know that this can all go away with a very small dose of any opiate. The worst physical and emotional pain imaginable can all be instantaneously erased by just giving in. I want to note that Suboxone did save my life and I did something stupid against the recommendations of my doctor. I was trying to tough it out. I have pretty severe ADHD. In an effort to take my life back, I decided to try the medication route. The first medicine they gave me was Strattera. It's a non-stimulant ADHD medicine. They prescribe it in order to avoid the stimulants. It made me super nauseous every day. I felt like I could handle that until it also gave me suicidal thoughts. It was so outside of my regular thought pattern. I made an appointment with my doctor and the next medicine they put me on was Adderall. It still wasn't the best fit, but it was like putting on glasses. I didn't totally believe or even understand my diagnosis until that moment. It's a trip knowing that a pill can put thoughts like that in your head. It makes me feel for anyone who has had those thoughts. You're not alone. Your brain chemistry is just mean. I never take medicine, but I took NyQuil before bed one time knowing I was about to get real sick. I woke up the next morning high as a kite. I had planned to go to the laundromat that morning and my roommate said she could drive, so I decided to follow through with doing that chore despite how out of it I was. Halfway through my wash I began to feel really sick and my roommate had left to go to the gym, so I was alone. Within 5 minutes I was sweating and incredibly nauseous. Every scent in that place became super potent. I sat down and tried to breathe, but it felt like the room was just getting hotter, and I was gagging at this point. At the peak of all this, my vision and hearing began to go. I was shaking, and my muscles felt like they had turned to jello, so I couldn't stand or walk outside for fresh air. I remember looking in the direction of someone I knew worked there, and I tried asking for a water and a trash can, but I couldn't hear how loud I was speaking, so it took her a while to understand that I couldn't get it myself. I ended up puking in the trash can in the middle of the laundromat filled with other people. I felt so ill I didn't care what I looked like, but I can imagine I must have looked like crap. It all happened in about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I began to feel okay again like nothing happened. I wish I knew what that happened, or why my body reacted that way. I'm allergic to pot. Before I had a life-threatening reaction and discovered my allergy, I had a horrible experience my second time smoking. I was 17, in the woods with my best friend. I started hallucinating that nothing was real. More specifically, that I was asleep and lucid dreaming that I was in the woods with my best friend. My eyes got all gummy and my nose was running. I kept laughing hysterically in that not funny at all way. I tried to drink some water, but I thought I was reaching out in my sleep to drink real water that I couldn't actually swallow in the dream, so I spit it everywhere, including all over myself. A few times. I was really thirsty. I kept telling my friend she wasn't real, which made her pretty concerned for me. Well, that and the snot and the spitting. I kept trying to explain the dreaming / not real thing to her, but it didn't make sense, because it was totally nonsensical anyway, and I was pretty convinced I was going to be stuck like that forever. It was a really intense 20 minutes or so, before the hysteria passed. I can't even explain how bad it was. But being a teenager, I tried again another time. After I turned into a Lego person, my throat closed up. Imagine explaining that hospital trip to your mom. Side note, I thought for years that pot affected everyone that way, minus the throat closing. During my first intravenous dose of immunotherapy, lymphoma treatment, I suffered two scary, but common and controllable, side effects. First, I had an anaphylactic reaction that interfered with my ability to breathe. Scary stuff. It was like I forgot how to move my diaphragm. The oncology nurses were prepared for it, and once my system became accustomed to the new chemical, the effect passed. Later during the same infusion the treatment started to do its job. It started to slaughter the cancer cells. However, a side effect of this is that I temporarily lost the ability to thermoregulate to control my body temperature. I rapidly became colder than I'd ever been in my life. Again, the nurses were expecting such a reaction. They wrapped me up in several blankets and heating pads and kept me warm until about 20 minutes later, I regained the ability to heat my own body. The head oncology nurse smiled, put her hand on my chest, and said, "Congratulations. You just assassinated millions of cancer cells.